This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Okay, look. If you want to just keep doing the same old thing, then maybe this idea is not for you. I, for one, am not going to compromise my artistic integrity. And I'll tell you something else. This is the show, and we're not going to change it. Right?
How about this? You don't like the
good to say that again. The 4-month hiatus is over. More on that in just a second. If you are new to the show, welcome aboard. And if you're an old-time listener, thank you for sticking with the show. But welcome to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake, a comic book podcast, a chronological look at the character starting in 1989, and currently in our timeline, it is 1996 for the character. Like I said, I'm Rob. Welcome to episode 135, and with me is a voice that you've heard on this show before. He was on a satellite show, Everyone Loves Young Justice, but he is now on the show properly, Mr. J. Yaws. How are you doing this afternoon, sir?
I am doing great, Rob, and I am glad to be here.
It is so cool. Now, it's very cool to have you officially a part of the show. We should have done this from the get-go when we started doing Young Justice and folded the whole ball in together, but more on that probably later on down. So right around September, we were gearing up to, if you've already clicked on the link, you know this is going to be Superboy and Robin, World's Finest number 3. World's Finest 3. See, it's been a little too long, folks. World's Finest 3. When this was set to originally go in September of 2021, and we were figuring out the initial idea was to get Chuck Dixon back on the show and go through this. That was what the long game was going to be for. And that obviously didn't work out quite right. We thought, let's bring on somebody else. And then one week led into another week of scheduling conflicts, and it just kind of kept going and going. And before I realized it, I was like, I think I need a break. Almost 9 years, the better part of 8 years, the show has been in existence from December 13th, 2013, if you want to do the math. And I didn't realize that, just churning this show out, and then Young Justice kind of came along, that it's been pretty much nonstop and then bouncing around to some other shows. And I think once I had a moment to kind of take a breath, I was like, oh, we'll start up next month. And then it was like, well, let's get out of the holiday season. Well, let's get out of the new year. In that time, Jay had been picking up Robin issues and sending me messages. You were kind of doing that, I think, with Young Justice, of kind of starting to finish your collection of Robin issues. So over the course of this break, you would be sending me messages of like, hey, I got these books, and hey, I got these books. So in the latter part of December going into January, I was like, oh, let me pull out a couple issues that you got. So I'd thumb through and I'd read those. I'm like, oh, that's a fun read. we should talk about that one of these times. I'm like, well, we're going to, hey, idiot, you have a podcast. Maybe you should just do it on the podcast that you already started and hope that Dustin didn't delete the Batman Universe account for Robin. Everyone Loves the Drake. So a big part of you going out and getting your books, and I'd like you to talk about, kind of what led you to do that and all that, but it kind of gave that energy of like, is anybody really paying attention? And it was nothing more than a text message from a friend that was like, hey, check out, I'm buying these Robin books. Now, before we get to Jay real quick, Terence and Ryan would have been here, but we were originally going to record a week ago. I had a snowstorm, and we're supposed to get another one this coming Wednesday, believe it or not.
Yeah,
Terrence,
I'm in Texas. It's supposed to snow on Thursday, apparently. So this is, this is our window that we've been actually literally trying for a couple weeks to do this. And when Terence and Ryan couldn't make it, Terence was like, you've got to record and you've got to get this done. So they will be here eventually on a future episode, hopefully for the second part of this book, but they could pop in. We don't know. So Jay, that long-winded thing that I just went through, where were you in your Robin collection? Was this something you had just started and stopped, or what kind of led you to want to complete it? Yeah, well, first off, I'm glad I can be the substitute for Chuck Dixon. So that's a
see. I was trying to weave that thread, and it was. To pair up to that, I wanted, this being a big book, I wanted to have a group of voices to discuss this as being the first meeting. And I thought, no offense against Terence and Ryan, but I was like, I just don't want the three normal knuckleheads to, be doing this book. And with having done the Young Justice show with you, I was like, this is already right in our wheelhouse. And what a great vehicle to dovetail that show back into this one, where these two characters first got their, team up together. So anyway, back to you, sir.
No. But as for the Robin collecting, I got up to issue 83 or something, way back, up to the year 2000, somewhere around there. I started collecting the title. I like to say it was issue 47 is the first new issue that I bought off the stands. And then I just went back and bought a bunch of back issues and everything. I'd had in the, 22 years since, I have kept my Robin, my Tim Drake Robin collection with, all the original miniseries, Robin, Cry of the Huntress, Joker's Wild. I may have flipped those two. I think it's Joker's Wild, then Cry of the Huntress.
Yes, yeah.
Anyway,
yep.
All the annuals had the Bloodlines annual, the Weird Elseworlds annual, the Eclipso annual. I had pretty much every solo Tim Drake title up until, like I said, issue 83, and then just around that time, just stopped reading comics as much. Was still into comics, but just kind of stopped collecting, but I still kept them because I was like, well, this is a lot, and maybe one day I'll finish it, and just kept them, all these years. But around this time last year, I popped into a comic book shop that has, I don't know how long it's been there, but it's pretty much right across the street from the church that I go to. And my wife had even said, hey, we need to go there sometime just because, it's a new comic book shop. So one night after a Saturday service, I decided to pop in there. I was just looking around. It's a small shop, but they had a pretty decent back issue selection. And just for fun, I went to the R's in the DC section and started thumbing through all the Robin issues. And I was like, have it. But then I want to say there were 3 issues they didn't have that were later on after I officially stopped collecting. One of them, fun enough, let me see where it is. They're right behind here because I'm going to frame some of these. But one of the ones that I got, was Robin 118. That is actually that's actually signed by the cover artist Phil Noto.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I really like his style, and I was like, hey, a signed copy of this, and it was $3. I was like, heck yeah.
Mine.
So I got that, and then there were like 2 other issues that I don't even remember which ones they were. I picked them up and bought them, but then I was like, I'm really not feeling a lot of the current Batman comics. There's no, I love comics. I love reading them. I love talking about them. But the current, just comic scene, just current continuity. This was also around the time of, Future State, which, whatever, and all this stuff. But I was like, I'm not really feeling this now, but I still love comics. Still want to have an outlet. I was like, hey, how about I try to complete my Robin run, my Robin collection? And to this point, I had gotten up to issue 83 of Robin. So I still had another 100 issues of that title. And
I miss those days. I miss those days of still on the hunt. I need random, 116 and 92, stuff like that.
Yeah. And, it was fun and energizing, but, I still had 100 issues, a couple of specials and one shots for that. And then the entire, 26 issues of Red Robin and everything to go. But I was like, this could take me years, but at least it'll be something fun that I can constantly, if I find a comic book shop, see how many holes I can fill in. So over the course of the past year, anytime I would go to a comic shop, I would, pop in and see what they had. And I was able to fill in a lot of it just myself. But then I had a couple of friends like Justin Kowalski. He had the Let's Go comic show.
Yep.
He had some back issues that he was trying to, trim down on his collection. So he asked me which ones I needed. I sent him my whole list, and he had a couple of them. So he sent me those, and then a couple of other people sent them. And I purposefully tried to stay away from eBay as much as I could, just because it's it's more fun to actually go dig through the bins and see what I can find. About the only ones that I did that for were the ones that I was like, okay, I am probably never going to find this. There was a Robin and Spoiler special, and then I think Robin Annual number 7. And I was like, annuals can get really, really hard to come by, especially latter day ones like that. So a couple of issues I bought off the bay, but as the hip cool kids probably don't say, because I'm not a hip cool kid. But pretty much everything else I tried to get through comic shops and Fan Expo Dallas when it came back last September, I think it was. I filled up. I think in one day I got almost every single Red Robin issue for $1. And
that is brilliant. $26 out the door.
Yeah, and I also got Robin 183 for $15, which was steep, but I was like, well, whatever. But then a couple of where I got the Red Robin issues, they had it for $1, so I was kicking myself. But I was like, okay, whatever. But it was a mission. It was one of those things that made me realize what I loved about doing this as a kid when I first started collecting comics. And then, like I said, over the past year, I actually managed to complete my Tim Drake Robin and Red Robin collections, going from, maybe about 100, a little more issues in hand to over 250 issues, if not more. Yeah, I did it in 9 months, so that was kind of crazy. I also got Tim's first appearance.
Batman 436.
I got 436. I got his first appearance in costume, so 442. And then, sorry, I'm reaching over and getting these out of my long box. And then, the first appearance of Tim Drake officially as Robin in the, brilliant Tim Drake costume in Batman 457. I got those. I got that, what was it called? Sleigh Ride, that Detective Comics issue.
I love that issue.
that was after I'd completed everything, but I was like, okay, I mean, that's technically a solo Tim Drake issue, so, why not? It's a notable issue. Even got weird stuff, like the Arkham Knight Robin special that tied in.
That is a fun issue. Terrence and I covered that one.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
But it's like, I mean, it's not like Tim Drake proper from the, comics canon, but still, it's a Tim Drake book. I got the Batman and Robin / Red Robin issue of the New 52 series that I think that one introduced Carrie Kelly into modern continuity. But I mean, I got that because it was like, well, Batman and Red Robin, so why not? I mean, needless to say, over the past year, I've gotten back into collecting Robin and finished collecting Robin. But I've actually had this issue, World's Finest 3, parts 1 and 2. I've had both of these since the late 90s when I started collecting. And I actually bought these at a local mall. They used to have a comic book stand in the middle of like one of the like foyer areas, kind of near some of the big anchor stores where it's a lot bigger and more foot traffic. So I remember buying these 2 issues from that stand. And so flipping back through it, I was like, man, we really need more of those comic stands in malls because that was a just really cool memory. Just going back to the late 90s when we would have stuff like this, but also being able to revisit this because I flipped through it a couple of times over the years just to admire the art and everything. But I actually hadn't read this since like 97 or whenever I first read this. So it was fun to return to this.
Yeah, this was something that was on the short list for the show. And, thinking about almost 9 years ago, trying to put this together, I didn't know if I was going to do an index show, which is what this is, where you start at this issue and you move forward and you get as far as you get, whatever.
Right.
I was going to go, we'll do this one and we'll bounce around. So once Terrence came on board, we started going, let's tell the through line of Tim Drake and going, all right, World's Finest 3 is one of those. And this is one I had bought, and I think I remember reading this when it first came out. Bought the second issue, never read the second issue. So there were books that were on my list of going, once we start getting once we get into the 40s and some of the 50s, there are issues I have never read because I was, playing in some of my first bands at the time and, all that stuff. So I was in and out of comics. And if you go back early part of the show when I was still picking up issues. So, a thing that I started doing, Jay, when I was buying issues was, okay, now I got all the Tim Drake Robin issues. Well, now what? So then I started going, well, Chuck Dixon was writing detective, so a lot of the detective stories tie in to the overall arc of everything. So this Dixon universe goes on. So then I started going, well, he was writing Birds of Prey, and he was writing Catwoman, and he was writing detective. So what if I just follow Tim everywhere he pops up? So that got to be, finding a needle in a haystack. Then it was finding a thumbtack in a haystack. So that's when I started, telling Terence and Ryan, like, hey, Tim's in Birds of Prey, and it follows right around this issue. So don't be surprised, Jay, if I pull out a Birds of Prey issue. But
thank goodness for DC Universe Infinite.
That's right. So, I've been kind of in the same boat, and I don't want to go down a whole thing. So I've never commented on this before, and I'm going to loosely comment it on here. I've not been happy with the overall state of comics lately, and every week I'm constantly like, okay, I'm going to drop these books. I'm going to pare down. The enjoyment. And I've been having this issue. If you go back to our Young Justice episode podcast, where I think both of us were literally struggling to get through those last few issues of the Bendis run. We've been through so many incarnations and versions of Tim Drake over the years, where I know we on this show and you and I on the Young Justice were like pointing like, but look how good these characters were back during this time or back during this time. Not that you can't move forward and all that stuff, but when a character is written so well and things are done and once you start making multiple changes in overall universe and stuff like that, Michael Bailey had said it on his show. He realized that DC Comics had showed him the door at a certain point when he stopped buying current Superman comics.
Yeah.
He goes, when he started with the John Byrne Superman, that's where his entry point was. He says he's sure that somebody that loved Superman right before John Byrne came on probably dropped Superman at that time. So he said, comics are cyclical. You're going to find where DC opens the door, you choose to get on, you choose to get off. And he said, sometimes you get off and they just kind of show you the door. So I don't know if that's where I'm at in my head of going, but I always buy comics every week. Mm-hmm. And my wife is like, but there are so many back issues that you don't have and that you could still continue to buy comics every week. It may just not be the newest and greatest thing right now. She goes, but if the old stuff is the newest and greatest for you, then why not hang your hat on that? So,
exactly. Yeah, I mean,
don't do something out of obligation because you feel like you have to. You can change.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's kind of like the mentality of every issue could be somebody's first comic.
Right.
It's like, well, I mean, there's always going to be even if you've been reading comics for 20, 30 years, there's still going to be an issue that's going to be your first time reading that comic. So yeah, that's kind of, in a sort of roundabout way, what sparked my wanting to complete my, Tim Drake solo stuff is, I mean, I've had it for 20 years. I mean, like you, not exactly thrilled with a lot of what's going on with just publishing with new initiatives, start and stop continuity, and let's try this, throwing stuff at the wall, see what sticks, and most of it not, but they're still, just trying to, foist changes to the universe and continuity and everything on everything to where it's just not exciting to read anymore to me. But I mean, again, it could be someone's first introduction. So I'm not deriding it. It's just like you said, it just might not be that's what is for me anymore. But going back, I mean, like you said, even though I collected up to issue, 80, whatever, back in the the late 90s going into the early 2000s, I don't even know if I actually read the last handful of Robin issues that I bought before just deciding to call it quits. So I mean, I know I've read every one of those issues up through Cataclysm and No Man's Land, and the couple of issues after that, like when Tim starts at like a boarding school or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's really the last Tim Drake solo stuff that I really remember reading from back in the day. So even if I have read those before, going back and rereading them to follow along with the podcast here is going to seem fresh because I have no memory. Like I even pulled out some of the issues to look at the covers just to, while I was cataloging to see which issues I need. And I'd be like, I have zero recollection of ever even touching this comic, let alone having it for the better part of 2 decades.
And I think that's the cool thing. Like I'm scrolling through as you've been talking, just the issues from Mike's Amazing World that I'm going to reference here in a little bit. And I clicked on, issue 1. Well, not that one because I read that issue. I forget where it was now. Just lost it. This is where I'm going to edit. I think it was 164. Yeah, issue 164. It's this wonderful Pat Gleason cover when he's in his 1 year later outfit, and there's a kid down on the ground in the rain, and Tim is looking up. I was like, I love that cover. I know nothing about this particular issue. It's in the Big Leagues trade, which ironically I think I own thanks to an Ollie's haul.
Oh, nice.
But just reiterating for the people, because we're going to take a quick little promo break here in just a second before we get to our featured topic, is that was the whole point of putting this show together was if I was doing nothing else other than just sitting down and reading a comic book that I collected some 20 years ago, where one day I can say I have read every single Robin issue, and this continues to underline why, for me, he is still my favorite character in the DC universe, regardless of what era that is. And I'm proud to have Tim Drake posters and action figures all about McFarlane. Give me my Tim Drake figure.
Oh, seriously.
But that's what I want to continue to do with this show. So hopefully you will all enjoy, hopefully, the next 9 years of the show. And I promise you we will start getting through these a little bit more, but I know Terrence is going to go, Rob, this issue of Robin actually ties into a Detective Comics issue. So I know we'll still talk about Batman and some of the ancillary things that are going on. And I've been saying it for a while on the horizon.
Robin's supporting cast like that Batman guy.
Yeah, like that Batman guy. Robin's partner, Batman. So more on that in just a minute. Thank you for tuning in to Robin Everyone Loves Drake. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back in just a moment.
There's just one last thing I haven't figured out yet. Who the second Robin was. The dead one. I used to think it was Jason Todd because he was also a Bruce Wayne kid, but then I saw him the other night.
You saw Jason Todd?
The night my father was shot. He was standing across the street from the shop wearing a hoodie.
And you recognized him from across the street?
He walked like Robin. I studied him too.
It's nice to meet you, Tim.
We'll meet again.
What do you get when a fantasy, gaming, horror, sci-fi geek and an Army veteran history nerd want to do a comic book related podcast?
Why, you get the Weird Warriors podcast, of course. Weird War Tales was a 124-issue DC comic book series published from 1971 to 1983.
Along the way, we'll sidetrack on to an occasional special mission where we discuss an issue of a like-themed comic book from a different title or publisher.
There are also the rare Road Warriors episodes where we report on comic-related road trips like conventions or visiting the homes and grave sites of comic greats.
We'll nitpick what the comics creative team got wrong and crow about what they got right. We'll also break down the facts behind the fiction in the stories, which is sometimes quite weird in its own right. Even the letters page and our favorite ads can't escape our judgment, just as we can't escape yours in our own dead letter office mailbag.
Torpedo-eating dinosaurs.
Haunted chateaus.
Time-traveling rats.
Zombie robots.
Day-walking vampires.
Gargoyle armies.
And that's just in the first 20 Weird War Tales episodes. So, report for duty with the Weird Warriors podcast with Max and Rich, where we promise to make war
no more.
Never mind. I forgot who I was talking to. So what have you heard about our Tarzan guy?
Still unconscious, but the police found out something interesting about him. He had acrophobia.
Oh.
It means fear of heights.
No joke?
All right, this is a book other than, getting through A Lonely Place of Dying, which is going to be, early on, and then talking about Nightfall. Aside from the cataclysms in No Man's Land and all of that, this was something that I know the three of us were wanting to talk about, and I'm glad that Terence and Ryan, they will definitely be on the next episode talking about part 2, but World's Finest. And right before the world went all crazy cuckoo, one of the last conventions I went to was a Cincinnati Comic Expo, and I got to meet Tom Grummett again for like the third or fourth time. And every time I went to a convention where he was at, I always forgot to take these two books for him to sign. And so I was glad the last time I saw him, I was able to get him to sign both of these. And as soon as I pulled him down out of my bag, he was like, I had a really good time doing these two issues. He said, I wish the story lasted longer. And you could just tell through all of the pages, the amount of detail and care that he put into this book. Before we take a look at the synopsis, here are the credits for the book that I'm reading these from Mike'sAmazingWorld.com. The cover date is 1996 with an on sale date of October 30th, 1996 with a whopping $4.95 for 1996, since this is a prestige format type of a book. The editor is Frank Pitteris. The credits for the issue are, the writers in tandem are Carl Kessel and Chuck Dixon. The penciler is the wonderful Tom Grummett. The inker is Scott Hanna. The letter is Ken Lopez, and the colorist is Scott Burnham. And the cover credits go to, again, Tom Grummett and inker being Scott Hanna. And now, Superboy and Robin in World's Finest 3, Book 1. A little brief history. Superman and Batman officially became partners in 1954 in issue number 71 of the original World's Finest series. This 2-issue story continues the tradition with the likely successors of the Man of Steel and the Dark Knight. In the swampy marsh of Gotham City, all is silent until Metallo arrives. He's been wasting his time in Metropolis for far too long and wonders why he has not come here sooner. Who's going to stop him? The Bat of Gotham? Yeah, right. A group of would-be naval bandits in the midst of trying to steal a prototype Navy nuclear type of vessel, if you're Chekhov in Star Trek, in Gotham Harbor when Metallo decides he's the one that needs this more than they do. Metallo makes quick work of them and blasts them off the ship. With the nuclear reactor inside of the metal ship, the metal monster can now have his control of the city and those punks in those costumes with it. Meanwhile, in Arkham, Poison Ivy is on the floor and she doesn't look good. At least that's what she wants the guards to think. All she can muster out is Gotham is dying. Swinging from his bat line, Tim Drake, a.k.a. Robin the Boy Wonder, is pondering the night so far in Gotham. When he hears a call over the scanners, there is an explosion on the naval yard. Upon Robin's arrival, it's not one of the usual suspects in Gotham. It's a robot. The GCPD is on the scene, and they are quickly taken out by rocket launchers coming straight from the robot himself. This is not going to be an easy night, Robin thinks. Robin swings in and dilapidated buildings from Babylon Towers towards Robin. In that moment, Robin is being held upside down and face-to-face with Metallo. Metallo does not know who this boy is, but there will be no need much longer. Metallo will soon end him enough. Nothing will stop Metallo. At that moment, Superboy flies overhead, and not a minute too late, Metallo turns to fire at the Boy of Steel and throws Robin like a baseball towards the young flying superhero. Superboy thinks this might be one of the Flying Graysons, literally, or something like that. Once Superboy catches Robin, the two introduce themselves to one another. Superboy was really kind of hoping that he might run into Batman instead of this new Robin. The two poked jabs and back and forth handed compliments at each other of who they think they should call in or who's the more inexperienced. Robin tries to take charge, but Superboy says he works much better on his feet. While Superboy takes to the skies again, Robin heads down an escalator. That's not an escalator, yep. Robin jumps down on top of a greenhouse, one of the few buildings left in the Babylon Tower area from the clench. Metallo grows to like 50 feet. Superboy flies at Metallo, and tentacle-like fingers Fire from Metallo. He electrocutes Superboy. Robin swings in quickly and sprays suppressant foam in Metallo's eyes. Now the monster can't see. Inside the greenhouse, Poison Ivy looks on as the two boys are trying to save the greenhouse and her. How sweet. Superboy, now free, punches Metallo, and there's a tremendous explosion as pieces of the metal nemesis fall to the ground and what's left of some surrounding buildings. Robin says that Superboy and Metallo must have leveled a city block, or what's left of it. Superboy says, yeah, it happens all the time. Robin and Superboy begin their search for the reactor that Metallo stole. Unbeknownst to the two boys, a metal skull makes its way out of the rubble and has come to life. It's what's left of Metallo. As the two young men discuss retrieving the radioactive core themselves, or calling the authorities to survey the area, a sexy red-haired figure makes her entrance. Before Robin can warn Superboy who she is, she calls to the boy of steel and kisses him, just the way he likes it. Superboy picks her up in her arms and the two fly away. This is one scenario Batman did not prepare him for. Unless Robin radios Alfred and tells him that the two are probably headed to Hawaii, the perfect paradise for Poison Ivy. Metallo's metal skull hears this as well. Later, Robin arrives back at the Batcave and tells Alfred there is no one else he can trust right now. Bruce wouldn't have given the key code to Robin if he didn't have a backup plan like this for the Man of Steel. Let's hope this little green ring will work on the Boy of Steel. To be continued.
Kryptonite. Hurts.
Which is why Batman keeps it in an overwhelmingly impenetrable vault at the Batcave. Well, more like a whelmingly penetrable vault.
So like I said, this was something that I was real excited to get to do, and I was saying earlier, I know I had read this first issue, but going through it, I've read it 3 times because I thought, we were going to do it 3 weeks in a row. So I actually read it the last 3 weeks, and I read it again last night, and this was just a fun issue, and every time I read it, I constantly kept saying, I'm glad I'm restarting the show. I'm glad I'm restarting the show. So let's talk about the cover of this first. And I know Terrence always makes fun of me about saying, oh, this is poster worthy. I want a poster of this. I think this is so cool. It's not really hearkening back to an issue that I can recall. The Superman Batman officially became partners in 1954 with issue 71, the original World's Finest. But this kind of feels like it's an homage to a lot of different covers of that era from the 50s and 60s and all that from World's Finest, where Superman would be a little bit higher in the composition and Batman would be a little bit lower. But even just stuff like the buildings, the detail work and the bridges that are going around. But Tim and Connor look like no perfect. Grummett just does a fantastic job with the illustration. I love the big clock behind him and seeing that big WF3. I always thought that was a really cool logo. So what are your thoughts on this first cover for book 1?
Absolutely love it. I mean, I would get a poster of this in a heartbeat. Just such a cool dynamic shot. It's one of those shots that if you think about it for more than a second, it's like, where is Robin jumping from? Who cares? Because
right.
It looks so cool. I mean, they're in great poses that really kind of exemplify their skill/power sets. You got Connor in the back, kind of flying up there, and then Tim more lunging with his trademark bow staff. And it even shows that their different body types and builds, even their approach to going into action, where, since Connor can fly, he'll be more going, like head first. And whereas Tim would be maybe a little bit more, this might be reading too much into it, but still being more reactive and reactionary, maybe going more on the defensive.
I gotcha.
Yeah, well, I mean, he would be more, trying to look over the scene, try to make a game plan. It's less headstrong, and as we'll find out in the pages here, just rushing into action like Superboy does. He would be more, trying to come up with a plan and everything. So, like I said, it might be reading too much into their poses, but I still feel like it captures both the characters. And I have no doubt that 12-year-old Jay, when he had this comic, would put a piece of paper over Robin to trace it so that I could draw my own original character's costume over it and everything, just because that's such a cool shot of Tim with his legs thrust out and the bow staff and just the look of determination on both of their faces. I love this cover.
Yeah, this cover's great. And spoilers, I think it's probably the better of the two covers, where the second cover is telling more of, okay, this is what's happening in the issue. If you've already read it, you kind of got the idea of it. This one is just setting up the adventure, and you're going, I have no idea how these two characters are getting together, but it is friggin' fantastic.
This is the cover that's going to sell you on the comic.
Right.
The second one is, well, you already bought the first one, so here is where we're going with the second issue.
Yeah.
This is definitely a case of, this doesn't really happen in the book, but it's still awesome, so who cares?
Right, definitely. The other credits that you heard before the synopsis, again, I want to kind of iterate, was the writers being both Chuck Dixon and Carl Kessel, which were both manning their respective titles, being Superboy and Robin. So I know there was an interview somewhere, and I'm sure somebody's going to pull it out and say, oh, Rob, you should have read this on the show, and I couldn't find it. I know I had it, and it was probably in the issue of Comic Scene or something somewhere along the way. But I think, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that Dixon handled all of Tim Drake's writing on those pages, and Carl handled Superboy's, and when they were together, they were working out the conversations together and say, well, if I was writing Tim, he would say this, and Carl would say that. So you get a very distinct two voices. Not that Dixon can't write Superboy, because I know that he has in the past, and Carl can write a good Tim Drake, but with both of them handling their respective characters, you get a really good feel of there are two separate voices and two different ideologies working in the same book, and how they work out. Sometimes when somebody's writing, a whole group of people together, you can kind of tell it's one writer's thought, and that's fine. But I think this is a unique, where you get the both of them working together and setting up their own thoughts and their own plots to work out the main part of the story. What do you think about both of them writing this? Well, they write both issues, but this issue together.
No, I mean, it definitely helps to make it where it doesn't feel like a Robin issue featuring Superboy or a Superboy issue featuring Robin. You have the unique perspectives that each respective writer brings to the characters, and you have the collaboration of them, co-plotting, I assume, but also, writing the dialogue together, to where, it does feel like it's, like you said, they can each write the other character just fine, but it's nice being able to have, Dixon, who defined Tim Drake, and Carl Kessel, who did lots of, I haven't read a lot of the Superboy solo issues, maybe like the first dozen or so, and then, all of his appearances in the death and return of Superman arcs and everything. But I mean, Kessel, made Superboy a, 90s teenage boy, but still, sympathetic and a joy to read, just with his writing. So it's nice being able to get the two, let's say, experts on these characters to collaborate, so that it feels like a joint venture between the two, rather than X gets the spotlight while Y is the backup, or, vice versa.
And one other part of the cover, before we get into the story, that I forgot about, there is actually a back cover that does have back artwork on it, with being Poison Ivy holding the skull. Spoilers if you don't know Poison Ivy's in this. Holding the skull of Metallo, and it says, "Where have you been all of my life?" So I like that it wasn't just a black backed cover with, WF3 written on the back of it, that Grummett did do back covers for both of these, whether it's a full wraparound or it's just another image. So it's like one of the prestige format books. It's a 52-page issue with both of them. So this does make you feel like, hey, this is something special. And the other thing I wanted to, I don't know if there's a big discussion here, but that Superboy gets the top billing on this, as opposed to Robin, where Robin is Tim Drake's been the longer running character of the two. And I wonder if that's just doing a nod that Superman got top billing back in the day. So since it's Robin and Superboy, it would be Superman and Batman, so they just went that way. But that was something I was always like, I wonder why Robin took second billing. It's probably just for that. Do you have any thoughts on
No, I
billing?
think that's I actually thought about that because I was kind of surprised that they didn't flip it for the second issue. Almost to be like, Superboy and Robin and then Robin and Superboy. But, I mean, Batman getting top billing over Superman really didn't even start occurring until, the last, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Because it was always Superman, Batman, World's Finest. I mean, I wouldn't say always. I'm sure there might be several examples where that's not the case.
Yeah, but you're right. The majority would be Superman and Batman.
Yeah, and even in the classic World's Finest, like you were saying, I'm pretty sure Superman always got top billing over Batman because for the longest time, Superman was actually the more popular and better selling character, especially in the time when the original World's Finest was being published. So it makes sense for Superman to get top billing. So yeah, I think this is just a nod to that.
Well, let's move into the interior of the book, and I just like the way, now Jay and I think are both looking at this digitally. It's a little bit easier than pulling the...
nope, I'm actually reading my floppy.
Wow, then I've got the floppy in my hand, and I'll keep my digital up here. And I like the... I'm going to call it a surprint. I can't think of what I want to call it. But where you get the monochrome, artwork of Metallo holding Robin upside down. You get all the text.
Yeah, cool. It's a cool credits page, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And then the back page does something very similar, giving you the preview of the following. But Dixon does this well when he writes, and Carl tends to do a little more mystery and intrigue. So I think they do a flip, where Dixon likes to start with action right away. You get more of that in the second issue. Mm-hmm. And it's not that it doesn't happen here, but I like these shots where most of the panels are the same, a 6-panel grid layout. Are, the top one is showing the frog and then the water and the pond and all that, but then you get like the puddle of like the moss and the water in there until you get the metal foot. Mm-hmm. Now, if I was writing a Superboy and Robin comic, the team up of villains, I don't think if I had 100 darts to throw at all of the characters in DC that I would have pulled Metallo and Poison Ivy to fight off against Superboy and Robin, which we really don't see much for Poison Ivy till book 2, but we won't talk about her in great detail probably in this episode yet. But Metallo was always one of those characters for me, and Michael Bailey's probably going to boo me for saying this. I just didn't get it. I do remember back in the day, and the day was a Wednesday, when I first looked at this, I was like, Metallo? Like, really? And then when the book starts, I thought, oh, well, clearly this is going to be, Superboy and Metallo fighting. And then I was like, it's Tim and Metallo? Like, how is this going to work? So this is the part of the show where Jay is going to school Rob on why Metallo is kind of cool, because apparently I have not had much interaction with Metallo. So, Jay?
That's all right. Yeah, I mean, I'm not like super like familiar. I mean, mostly from, Superman the Animated Series. And I mean, even this is, I think, my first exposure outside of the Superman cartoon of Metallo. So I've always kind of liked this weird, bulky, huge Metallo look, just because it was the first, comic version of him that I've ever read. I like the character fine. Amazo is one of those, weird android villains that's, maybe cool every now and then, but doesn't have a lot of depth. There is room for Metallo to go into like a lot of tragedy because, even just going off the Superman animated series, he's a guy who was manipulated into believing he needed some cure for something that, was given to him by Luthor, spoilers if you've not seen those episodes of Superman, then given, effectively immortality, but then he lost all of his humanity because of it. So there is a lot of tragedy there. Mm-hmm. I can't remember in the comics proper, like what was maybe created for the show, the cartoon, versus what it is in the comics themselves.
I just pulled
Go
his origin on DC Fandom. This is John Corbin was a professional con man until he was fatally injured in a car crash. The dying Corbin was found by a professor who was in cybernetics, and with that and Superman spearheaded getting him this like robot body and all that stuff. And then I'm skipping down here, before delivering a killing stroke, he was abducted by Lex Luthor, who realized that his kryptonite heart was immensely valuable and wanted the pleasure of killing Superman for himself. So at some point the kryptonite was used to help bring him around, and kind of swore like, he would never hurt Superman, and then of course becomes an arch enemy. He's been in parts with Doom Patrol, has interacted with Brainiac, which is kind of cool. So Steel and all that other kind of stuff. So yeah,
I mean, a cool enough character. Kind of like the irony of the thing that gives him life is the only thing that can kill Superman. But I mean, yeah, like you, I would not have imagined a team up, but even then, we'll get into it, especially in the second half of this story, between him and Poison Ivy. But, just keeping it very broad, that's not really what happens. And initially, it's just kind of, okay, well, these stories aren't coming together as much as we want. But I also think it's better for it, because it's not as contrived as just, let's just pair them together because we need a Superman villain and a Batman villain to, fight a Superman and, Batman family member. So I do kind of like that the two villainous threads are only tangentially related when they both ultimately have their own goals. And I think it works better for the story because of that.
Yeah. And, Metallo's whole thing is he's kind of been done and over fighting in Metropolis and having to deal with Superman. So he has that realization, why haven't I come to Gotham and kind of, I could take over Gotham, and what do I got to do? Fight a bat? No big deal. Steals the reactor core out of the nuclear vessel. And I'm going to make that joke all day. And that's kind of his modus operandi. If I can steal this thing, I can be the big bad in Gotham City, and I can rule this town. And there's no superpowered being. It's just some people in tights that I got to worry about. And then you kind of fold in Poison Ivy. And I'm always a sucker. Sometimes I think Poison Ivy is a one-note villain, like, she likes plants, and, the city's trying to get rid of greenhouses or put in a highway and ruin this forest. But I'm always kind of a sucker, like, she kind of half fakes a death. She's got to get into this ambulance and gets taken out, and that there's more of that in a little bit. That's kind of telegraphed from just years of reading comics of like, she's not really dying. This is just the way she's going to get out of Arkham, and, guys just can't help themselves around Ivy. Really quick, there's not much here in these couple pages, but anything that jumps out with you with Poison Ivy?
I absolutely 100% dislike it when Poison Ivy has powers and can manipulate plant life and make things grow. I find her much more interesting when she's, maybe a normal person who maybe through years of, working with toxins and everything has become immune herself, but not necessarily someone who has any powers or control over anything. Just a brilliant chemist who's an eco-terrorist.
Yeah.
Who, you can see her point, but also the manner in which she goes about achieving her goals and everything is not heroic at all. So it's like, even though I understand what you're trying to do, your ends don't justify, the actual means. So, you're still a bad guy here.
Yeah.
Isley. So I do like that she is more in that a normal person who is just using her own intelligence and cunning to achieve her goals, rather than, I can just make a bunch of vines grow through, my telepathic plant control and then choke these guys. She has to kind of think through it, which I think is, nice and refreshing and much more.
Yes. Pages 8 and 9. First, the page 8 anytime we get the hero shot of our hero swinging in through the city, it's just a really cool shot. And I love breaking the panel lines with Tim's foot just ever so slightly in there, but him coming towards camera. And I like how this issue really doesn't do much explanation of where Superman is or where Batman is. All that we know is Batman's not in Gotham City, and through just a few lines of dialogue later on, well, like, Superman's not around really either. And that's all you really need for it. And I love where it's like, oh, gee, if Batman were here, he would know how to, like, we've been with Tim long enough. He's got his foot set in Gotham City and can take care of most things here until he sees a giant, 10-foot robot. So a couple exchanges I think are really cool here. Seeing on page 9 with Metallo firing the rocket, blowing the squad car. It's got the big 86 on it coming towards the frame here. And then Tim swooping in and saving him. But the thing that made me laugh out loud, again, for like the third time reading it last night, I almost texted you guys and said, I didn't know that I wanted Harvey Bullock to have a bazooka, but I want Bullock to have a bazooka really bad from now on. And I like how Montoya's like, is that thing's not issued? And so what's the point? Just pointing that out,
Just tell me where to shoot.
I think that's cool. So I had forgotten that Montoya and Bullock are in here just for a little bit. And then seeing Metallo be this gigantic tank, I was like, okay, this is Saturday morning cartoon in the best possible way. Why would the robot not be a gigantic tank? And Tim kind of has that, revelation too of like, what is going on? So through these sections, what do you think about this? What's going on at the moment?
Yeah, to your point about Tim just being in the city alone with Batman nowhere around, I think it just shows just how much trust Bruce has in Tim to be able to take care of the city on his own, and kind of contradicts, the whole, well, Batman doesn't need partners, works alone, because no, he trusts his teenage sidekick enough to, leave the city to him while he goes and takes care of business elsewhere. So without even explicitly stating it on the page, if you've never read a Robin comic before and are only marginally aware of, Batman and his MO and everything, is seeing that, well, if Batman's not here but Robin is, then Robin must really know what he's doing and have Batman's trust to be able to take care of anything while he's, not in Gotham. This whole, it's my city thing, no one needs to help, well, clearly, if it's your city, you still have people who you trust to help. And I really like that. I like it when it's not Batman just being a jerk and not trusting anybody and, having contingencies for everything, whatever. It's right. Like, you know what, Tim? I trained you. I trust you. Here you go. So like I said, it's not explicit on the page because it's only coming across in a couple of lines of dialogue, but it still, just shows how great of a character Tim is and how he stands on his own as not just Batman's partner and sidekick, but as Robin, just Robin, period.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the fun things being where we are now, that we're past the Nightfall, we're past the Contagion where Bruce had come back from having his back broken and then left again and come back and had Dick as Batman, that Tim has been able to plant himself in Gotham City and is now working as his own superhero in his own book while still partnering up with Batman, like you said, that Batman can be off world or wherever, be out of the city, and we don't have clumsily bumbling Tim Drake still making mistakes and, oh golly gee, Alfred, how am I going to get out of this mess? Saying that about Alfred, that Alfred shows up here and we do get a shot of Superman on page 12 in the back computer, which is beautifully drawn. And I want to pause here really quick and saying we're in the Stas Johnson era of Robin. So looking at these issues again, going, wow, how many more opportunities are we going to have Tom Grummett to be drawing all these characters? We get just a quick one little shot of Superman on the back computer, but man, it's a nice shot, a nice elongated panel of the Bat Cave, and you get the Redbird in here, and the discussion with Tim and Alfred of like, okay, here's what's going on. Tim knows, okay, not that I can't take care of Gotham City, but I can't fight a 10-foot robot that turns into a tank. And, Bruce could, but he's not here. We need somebody super powered. So who's the first person that Tim thinks of? It's, of course, Superman, but he's not around. So I like the little joke that Tim and Alfred are having about like, I kind of hesitate who to ask. You could reach out to Superboy, and then of course Superboy's phone number is in the Honolulu phone book, which I think is really incredibly funny. And then we end up moving into Hawaii, and I had forgotten that that's where Superboy's book really kind of takes place. He's not really in Metropolis at this point. He's operating out of here, so I don't have a lot of Superboy, reading under my belt. So I was doing a little bit of extra homework here. So what do you think of the introduction of Superboy's cast of characters? His business agent, and then his on again, off again girlfriend that's the TV reporter, and then his business agent's daughter is going to win the Miss Kryptonite competition. So, like, I think it even says here at one point, this is almost like a Benny Hill sketch at some point. So, what do you think about this these section of pages?
I mean, I like the Robin and Alfred both working smart. It's like, okay, we don't know how to fight a 10-foot tall robot man, so let's ask the guy who has before. Duh. But, with that, not working out, that still, goes back to the, having constant mistrust of, every other hero and being stubborn and saying, oh no, I need to take care of this myself. It's like, and that it doesn't always work out. So I like that, they acknowledge it's like, okay, even though this is Gotham and it's our home turf, this is an unknown threat. So let's go, at least find out something from the guy who's actually fought him before. So I like that line of thinking. And also, kind of to circle back a little bit to, my Robin, collection completion. At some point last year, I also bought, I think it was Corgi, the die-cast metal car makers. I bought the Redbird.
Isn't that a beautiful piece?
It is. It's great. And I just love, Robin having his own car. And I think it's great that it can go from like a little, hoopty coupe that's very unassuming and everything to, a pretty cool superhero car, the touch of a button. So I always like seeing that in the comics. Yeah, the introduction to Superboy is great. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like Booster Gold. Just very much more in the, hey, I'm going to be a hero, but what's the harm in making a few bucks off of it?
Hi, it's me, myself, and I,
Yeah, and the fact that he's judging a Miss Kryptonite, pageant or something is, I mean, it's very, very much something a teenage boy would, die to find himself in. So, I mean, it's not remarkably PC, but it's
right.
I mean, it's in with his character.
Yeah,
and it's. I mean, it's a funny scene. It introduces you to Superboy, really well. I'm kind of impressed that in all of these pages, I don't believe he even mentions his tactile telekinesis once. Doesn't come up until much later.
I have a note here that says, I wonder how long it is before Jay and I have to remember Superboy's power, or Superboy remind us first. So that's funny that we got the point first. So like, I don't want to be the one to say it, and I think Jay is about ready to say it. So that's point for Jay.
All right, yeah. Didn't plan that. Just the magic of live radio here, ladies and gentlemen. And on page 19, I think it is. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but the very bottom panel where Superboy is stopping his publicist, Leech, unfortunately named
Leech. Yeah, little on the nose there.
Yeah, but also kind of reminiscent of Action Comics #1.
Yes.
Cover. In spirit, if not in, like a direct homage. But, you got a little bit of Superman lifting up that green car with someone running around in the back here. Superboy stopping a purple, I don't know what they call them where you are, Rob. slug bugs.
So
Slug
if I
bug,
was next to you and I said purple slug bug and I hit you in the shoulder, do you do that?
I mean, not anymore.
Well, I'm just saying,
growing
up, that I had a best friend of mine that he would just slug the crap out of you in the shoulder. You'd be like, "Ow!"
I've also heard punch buggy.
Punch buggy, yep.
Yeah, slug bug is pretty much what I've known them as. But so like I said, it's fun. Nice little homage there, either unintentional or intentional, not sure. But it's a good introduction to Superboy and how, immature he is, but that also kind of sets up one aspect of the story, particularly with Poison Ivy, but also how you can still see he still has a heroic bent to him. Just it's not as direct and refined and obvious as Robin.
Right. The scene that I liked with Rex Leach, his full name here, is it's a very Batman thing. And why wouldn't it be a Batman thing to do when Tim's trying to say, hey, I need help with Superboy, and Rex is like, oh, he's probably out saving the world, and is starting to go through the spiel, and where Tim was like, all right, you want to play through that? How about the Superboy air fresheners and the, Superboy animated cell and the signed numbers, where Tim is like, if you don't get me through to Superboy, I'm going to own you right now. I'll delete all your files, whatever that is. But just the way that Grummet draws him in panel 2, or the bottom section, actually panel 5, right above the 14, just that look on his face where Tim was almost like, go ahead, try me. We need to get Superboy to Gotham ASAP, and you need to do it right now.
Yeah, kind of disgruntled, very annoyed, but still determined, like, okay, you want to mess with me? Go right ahead. And, I'll do what my mentor has taught me to do. So here we go.
Yeah. I find it kind of funny, and it's done that way to be a little, bad choice of words here, Rob. I'm going to go with it. Really tongue-in-cheek that the winner of the contest is Leach's own daughter, and the look on Superboy's face when she plants one on him and he ends up, falling off of the stairs. I was like, this is your business partner's daughter. Like, that's a huge conflict of interest. So as much as Superboy's libido is working in one direction, he has that forethought of like, oh, this is real. This should not be happening right now. So just that wide-eyed look on his face is really kind of funny.
And when his news reporter, Girl Friday there, I guess you could say, and, when he was like, you're the greatest, Roxy, and she's like, oh, she is now. And he's like, of the contest entrance. That's all I meant. Yeah, it's funny. Like I said, not necessarily PC, but still, relatively harmless. I mean, these contests go on all the time. Superboy, that's part of his character, and especially of the time, this is very tame compared to a lot of other, hyper sexualized comics that were coming out, at this time in the industry.
Yeah. So the girlfriend is Tanya Moon, was a reporter for KONA TV. She was responsible for getting the first exclusive footage of the superhero known as Superboy. Just after the interview, she developed a brief relationship with the Boy of Steel. So she goes clear back to, the death and return of Superman, getting that first, I don't know if she was initially the death and return of Superman, but like I said, the first interview. And she does last through DC Comics for quite a while, looking at her, page here. So Superboy's really not like, okay, what's going on? He's still in the midst of the contest and talking with his girlfriend. But it's not till his girlfriend gets like the scoop of like, hey, this is what's going on in Gotham City. And that's the thing that causes him to fly away. So I like where his sense of duty kind of comes in, and just that shot of him leaving, flying up into the air, where we had that great shot of Robin swinging into Gotham City. We kind of get like a counterpart with Superboy
flying out of Hawaii. Yeah. Good parallels there, yeah. It didn't necessarily occur to me, but yeah, I like that. I like how we're introduced to Robin in the one manner, and then Superboy is introduced in a completely different manner, a completely different type of scene, but we still get to see him have that look of determination, knowing, okay, a job needs doing, so I'm going to go do it. So, Robin is introduced as a hero immediately. Superboy, we kind of have to get to know him a little bit first, but I still like that because Grummett has that nice look of determination. Drew that nice look of determination on his face to show that, when Superboy means business, he's got his mind set on it, and he will do business. It just might take him a few minutes to get there.
And just for a brief little bit that we don't get a chance to talk about, costumes a whole lot for other heroes because, we already talked about Robin's costume and Batman's costume, but just for Superboy's costume, three minds. This is really weird. So, back when he was initially introduced into comics, I bought his costume, hook, line, and sinker, never thought much about it. You get a few years past it and start seeing him in the costume, and you go, what? Like, this screams 90s. Everything that we were saying about Tim Drake's costume, of how they created a classic look for the character that is timeless, that has been on the silver screen, that has been animated, it's an action figure form. It's just stayed pretty much consistent. Tim Drake's costume is kind of like the atypical Robin suit that you will see. And Superboy's, once you get a few years past it, you go, this just screams the 90s if I've ever seen it. The shaved side of the head, the glasses. Now looking at it in 2022, I'm looking at it going, there's a reverence for this that I didn't think I would initially feel. That yes, it is very much of the 90s, but I find it simpler, if that makes any sense. Yes, it's busy with the belt strap and stuff, but seeing what we got in Young Justice, which Bendis was having, Gleason for a little while, put spikes on the collar and really overemphasizing it, where I started going, no, like Superboy's costume was really good. Eventually he would get the jeans and the black t-shirt look for Superboy. So do you have like the J. Yaws preferred look for Superboy? I think I'm telegraphing mine. As much as I like the black t-shirt, I really kind of like this. I was able to find the DC Universe Classic Superboy figure about 2 or 3 years ago of this costume, and I absolutely love this costume. So that's my 2 cents on Superboy's look.
I unironically love the leather jacket look for Superboy. It is very 90s. It also fits Connor, at least at this point in time. And I mean, even if you take away the jacket and the belts and the thigh strap that makes no sense, but whatever, it was the 90s. The bodysuit itself has a really cool design. The thigh strap I think actually works because it's like the red trunks on Superman's suit. It helps break up the colors. So that one yellow strap on his right thigh helps break up that, just red of the leggings there. But I mean, just looking at it with just the bodysuit itself, without the extra teenage boy 90s stuff. It's actually really cool. It's similar to like the Eradicators look,
yeah.
But it's different enough. And I mean, I love on Superman, classic red, yellow, and blue. But for other members of this, like the Superman family, I don't want them to just have another version of his look. I think this is, still a very much Superman family look with the shield and everything, but having like the black up at the top, and I'm pretty sure that goes down the arms.
I believe it does.
But having that, and then having that broken by the shield, and then going into the blue of the torso, which leads down to the red of the leggings and the black boots, I think that's a really, really good, unique look that is very much reminiscent of Superman's costume without looking exactly like Superman's costume. So I really like that. Supergirl has a lot of costumes like that I think are really cool too. So I definitely like this, and I think it's the best look that Connor has had, and one of the best of any Superboy look that we've ever gotten. So I definitely love this costume on it.
Very well said. So we get the little bit from Poison Ivy. I always kind of liked this about Poison Ivy, whether she can, make sunflower seeds turn into gigantic tarantula monsters. But I always liked that her kiss was venomous, and there was a little bit of mind control, and that eventually, they would die off, and she could kind of control them for a little bit. So I liked that part of her power set and being able to, if nothing else, get what she needs from the plants or whatever. So she's able to escape. This was a scene that I want to talk about coming up here on 25, with Robin being at the Babylon area from Batman Legacy storyline, from that whole thing that we just covered not all that long ago on the show, now that we've had a 4-month hiatus. So it's probably been about 6 months ago, but being able to revisit the clench here in just a moment, and the surrounding blocks of the Babylon Tower where Tim is inside of the Redbird. So I like that Dixon was able to tie this back in here, which is why I slotted this story where I did, that there's a little bit of a breather after the clench storyline in Batman Legacy, and then this falls right into the year that it was released, that Dixon still puts this in here. So I thought that was a nice little callback for anybody that's been reading the Robin and Batman universe side of the storyline. You get a little bit of history of like, well, why is Robin in this dilapidated part of Gotham City, and why does it look so bad? So as I was reading this a couple nights ago, I was going, oh, Babylon Towers, that was the whole building that ended up burning, and that's where the clench really started spreading from the beginning. So I know this is before you were on the show, but have you read Batman Legacy and Contagion, and what did you think of this little call out?
I mean, I've read them. It's been, decades since I've read them, but I've definitely read them, listened to the episodes, of course, appreciated your discussions of it and everything. But yeah, I mean, it does help that it's, Dixon writing both. So, I mean, of course, he's going to more likely to draw in something that he introduced and was part of a story that he was largely responsible for telling. But no, I like it. I like that it gives a little bit of continuity. It's like, hey, even with, all this other stuff that's going on, it's not immediate that the city recovers. We've still got, a big crumbled building that people don't want to get near because they're still afraid that the clench could have a resurgence, which, spoiler alert, it kind of does eventually.
Yeah.
But not in this story. So no, I mean, it's nice bit of continuity. I mean, it's not so in your face as to you feel like missing out on something if you haven't outright read Legacy. But if you have, then you're like, oh, okay, so yeah, that's still abandoned. I still get that, and I remember when that happened. So yeah, just a nice little bit of ongoing continuity there.
And this is right around the same area and block that Poison Ivy escapes from. So our stories are starting to combine here, where Robin's tracking Metallo, Poison Ivy is now on the scene, and from the insert page from the opening of the book where we see Robin being held upside down, Dr. Octopus from this No Way Home show. Oh, no, it's not Dr. Octopus. So Metallo and all his tentacles get Robin. So this is where that interior shot was in the inside of the book, with Robin being upside down. And much like I had envisioned this being the end of part 1, of the TV series. Tune in next week where Robin's upside down. He's probably seconds away from getting blasted by Metallo, but who shows up? Superboy. So another great shot of Superboy coming in. This is a beautiful shot. As much as I like the one of him leaving Honolulu, I believe this is the big character entrance for Superboy arriving in Gotham City.
Something I just realized in looking over the dialogue that I didn't notice, before when I reread this a couple weeks ago. Superboy misunderstands the situation because he's like, oh crap, Metallo's already torn through a bunch of the city, not realizing that this is an abandoned part of Gotham. But I mean, that was also, not to say that, Superboy's dense or naive. He wouldn't know. He could not possibly know about this. So it's kind of, just fun that he misunderstood what's going on, but still realizes that Metallo needs to be stopped regardless.
Yeah. And then again, if I was writing the story, how are we going to introduce Superboy and Robin? I don't think I would have said, let's shoot Robin out of a cannon that's inside of Metallo and have Superboy catch Robin. Their exchange is really very clever, very, very funny. It's on the nose sometimes, but Dixon handles it very well. And where Superboy's like, so I've only got one question. Who are you? And Tim's like, me? I'm Robin. I'm the one who threatened your agent to get you here. So I like this whole thing. Like, while a fight's going on, the two of them are trying to figure out, okay, so who are you? What are you? You know, why don't we just get a hold of Batman? And you're just...
Yeah, you're not Superman. It took you 8 hours to get here.
Right.
And Superboy's on the defensive says, less than 7.
Which, this just had me going right back to Young Justice with you and I. I'm like, this is where, like, you needed to be here. This needed to be your first episode on the Drake, because it's conversations that we've had on that show are literally, the framework is literally being laid out right here for what would become Young Justice. And I think...
Nice bit of poetic symmetry.
Yeah. And I like that Dixon and Kessel are having a little bit of fun with the humor in this, where Superboy's going to fly off and, you know, he says, you know, no problem, Boy Wonder. I think I work best on my feet, where it's almost the reverse of the dynamic of Superman and Batman, where Superman would probably be more, we need to scan the area, we need to see what's going on. And Batman would probably be saying no thanks, Boy Scout, I work best on my feet. And he would go off on his own. The reverse is happening here, which I think is really kind of funny. And the funnier thing is the stairs that Robin is going down. Oh, it's just Metallo.
Yeah. Which, since Terence, unfortunately, can't be on this episode today, he did point out to us that the reason Metallo can do everything he does in here is this happened pretty soon after the Underworld Unleashed event, where a bunch of DC villains like made a deal with the devil and got like upgrades. Like, I think Killer Moth became the weird Traxxas or whatever. Yeah. Like a literal living moth. You know, Metallo, apparently, I'm not sure the full scope of the deal, but he got the ability to, I guess, absorb and manipulate any amount of technology or metal to do whatever he wants. That's why he can turn into a tank or a train or a giant bazooka or elevators or escalators, whatever. So that's why Metallo is slightly different here. And also, I guess, doesn't need a kryptonite heart, because that's only kind of part of the story for him, because he's still running but doesn't seem to have the kryptonite power source. That's why he's going after the nuclear warheads, and then eventually something else that will come up at the end of the issue. But so a little tangent that I'm speaking on behalf of Terrence, who brought that to our attention. So thank you, Terrence.
Thanks, Terrence. So there's plenty of write-ups and stuff on Metallo. You can find them on DC Fandom Wikia link there that you'll see in the show notes that I'll put in here, so you can find some more on Metallo and some of these other characters. The rest of his book moves at a pretty good pace. You get a really cool fight scene with Robin spraying some fire suppressant material in Metallo's eyes, and Superboy basically punching the crap out of Metallo and all crumbling to the ground. So what they're really looking for is the nuclear reactor that he stole, and sees all the broken pieces. You see the skull of Metallo hanging from, some rebar. But the bigger thing that ends up happening is Poison Ivy has been watching a lot of this. She was in the greenhouse below some of the battle and was worried at some point that, they were going to come crashing into it, and kind of thought like, oh, they're trying to save my greenhouse. And I don't think the two guys really knew what was going on. They were just trying to stop this. But the big thing that happens here is Superboy, his libido is starting to get reactivated here, and is thinking with something else at the moment. And before Tim can have a chance to really say anything, Superboy pulls the well, hey, how are you? I've been waiting for you my whole life. And Poison Ivy kisses Superboy, which, if you're a Batman fan, that's like the kiss of death. And you have this really awesome expression that Grummett draws here at the bottom of the page, where Superboy and Poison Ivy are kissing, where Tim is like, hey, and Tim gets the shove, and Superboy is flying away with his new love. And where is the worst place in the world you could possibly take Poison Ivy? Hawaii. That is full of all this vegetation and all of this growth. Before we move to the last couple pages, what do you think about the fight sequence and then Superboy and Poison Ivy?
Yeah, like you said, it's really well paced. There's, quite a bit of dialogue going through here, but it still doesn't detract from the scene itself. It kind of adds to it, especially as the boys have this confrontational chemistry with their differing styles and everything, like you were saying. So I like that Robin is about to give Superboy, credit for, hey, stopping Metallo, but oh wait, that also took away all the support beams and everything, and it's going to bring the building, and the building comes crashing down. So, that's fun. Like you said, it's very well paced. You get enough conflict from them that you can understand where, they're both coming from. We tend to side with Robin more because he's, the more level-headed of the two. But even Superboy's like, well, I did what had to be done. So, I stopped Metallo, or so he thinks. So, why are you, being like that? The day saved. Hooray. Just thank me later. Like I was saying earlier about Metallo and Poison Ivy's plans intersect, but they don't intertwine. Yeah. Even Ivy, can see all the havoc, and she's even like that monster, he's, destroying everything. So she's not like, oh, hey, this big metal guy, I could team up with him for some reason because he's bad. She still has her own plans, and Metallo has his. They don't combine into one plan. They just are independent from each other, which, again, it's kind of refreshing, keeps it from being too contrived. Like, well, why would they be teaming up?
Right.
Because they really don't. It's more just like, okay, we got to stop Poison Ivy, but crap, we got to stop Metallo too. Yeah, I like that. And then, this is leading into the final stinger here. But it's, cool that, like I was saying before, that, Metallo is looking for, that, unattainable power source. First going with the nuclear warheads, but now he pieces together from overhearing Robin's interaction with Alfred, or a conversation with Alfred, that, oh, hey, he might have something even better than a nuclear warhead. So why don't I tag along here? So that leads us into the final couple of pages here, which I guess you'll take back over so we can talk over those.
This is always, the Batman is always prepared, and I like it that Batman trusts Tim enough to know everything that Batman knows. Like, well, you really, at least this version of Batman and Robin right now, like, the longer people would write it, since you start getting into the Grant Morrisons where Batman is holding more back from everybody. At this point, he may be keeping Nightwing at arm's length at some points in this, and maybe Oracle to the extent, but the person he really trusts the most is Tim. That, Tim's able to use like the DNA, handprint scanner and the retina scanner. That, prepared as Batman is, in the absence of Batman, Robin should be as prepared as Batman is, that he is able to get in to the containment unit and pull out the kryptonite ring to be able to take down Superboy if he has to, which I want this so bad from a Chuck Dixon comic, and I'm sure we're never going to see it because we're past the point of the time where where Bruce would take Tim downstairs and say, I've shown you everything, Tim, but in the event that Superman were to turn on the world or turn against the world, here's the one thing that we can use to take out Aquaman and Wonder Woman and the Flash. Tim knows that. So it makes Tim just as dangerous as Batman would be, but I get the feeling from Tim here, he knows that this is a last resort. Like, I didn't want to have to do it, but said if we can't even the odds against Superman and Batman, hopefully we can do it against, Superboy. I'm not crazy about this either, Alfred, but it's the only way. Like, Tim knows, rather than try, all these different plans and ideas, the end result is I'm probably going to need this ring, because if I couldn't stop Metallo, there's no way I'm going to stop Superboy. So seeing this shot, I think we've seen in like the Tower of Babel and some other stories. And even I have a couple World's Finest issues where Batman has like green bat gloves punching Superman. So this is kind of a call back to some of those classic things where Batman has to put on the green kryptonite ring. So it feels dirty's the only thing that I can think of, like, oh, Tim shouldn't have to resort to doing this, but at the same time it kind of works. So it's kind of a cool scene, but seeing it as a Tim Drake fan, I go, isn't there another way, Tim? But deep down, being a Batman fan, there's probably not.
Yeah, I mean, as tired as I am of Batman and Superman constantly being in conflict,
yeah,
and I could go 1,000 years without ever seeing Batman punch Superman ever again, and it would still be too soon. I like at least, the spirit and the idea of this for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, that both Robin and Alfred are both like, okay, I don't want to have to do this, but if it's the only way, it's the only way. I like that Tim is even like, I'm not even sure if this is going to work.
Yeah.
But it's the only chance that I have. But in a broader sense that you were kind of hinting at, it goes back to Tim becoming Robin and how he earned it. Mm-hmm. He didn't just put on the costume and say, oh, hey, I'm Robin now. He did that to save Batman. And then Batman said, okay, you can train to be Robin, but you're not Robin yet. And then, that's what Tim went through over the next, couple of months or years in continuity, however long it took for him to earn his place as Robin, to train, to earn Batman's trust, to earn the chance to be in the costume fighting alongside Bruce. So this is, more of that, of he earned Bruce's trust. He earned the right to wear the red and green suit. He earned the right to get his own updated suit. He earned the right to be able to watch over Gotham in Batman's absence. So this is just an extension of that. Even if, the details of it, I'm like, okay, yeah, punching with a kryptonite ring, that's old. That was old hat in 97. It's old hat in 2022. But still, just the idea of it, the spirit of it, the hesitation in the story that it's like, well, I'm not doing this just to assert, superiority over Superboy. It's, I need to stop him because if he's under Poison Ivy's control, then he needs to be snapped back into reality. But even then, I'm not sure it's going to work, but we don't have any other choice.
Yeah.
So I at least like how it's presented in the story. Yeah.
And that is the end for part 1. And the end of the episode. So the 4-month hiatus that the show took, there was no part of me that thought, all right, there's 52 pages in both of these books, so I could probably break them over 4 episodes. I think I'm going to leave this intact. We've been gone long enough. This deserves to be at the current runtime before I edit it. We're at 1 hour and 39 minutes, 1 hour and 40 minutes exactly right now. So, and I haven't even put the synopsis in here yet. It is great to be back. And barring another 9 years, I don't see any stoppage of, Rob needs to take another 4 months off again. So we're going to get back into the bi-weekly release schedule, and we'll hopefully start recording and banking some episodes so we can make that happen. A big hearty welcome to Yaws being part of the show. So if people are unfamiliar with you and they want to discuss with you beyond this out on the interwebs, where can the good people get a hold of you?
You can find me on Twitter. My personal handle is @JAYAWS, and I share comic-y things and occasionally write for my own little blog at Comic Pause, like you pause a video game or a movie, so Comic Pause. So yeah, I'd love to chat and interact. And thanks again for having me, Rob. It's good, and I'm glad to be back on the microphone, period, but especially talking comics with you.
Yeah, this is going to be a good time, and I think we're coming into some really cool Tim Drake stories. I know I've been saying it for a while, and we're coming into some that I know me personally I've not read in a very long time, if ever. You can follow me at Drummer Rob 10 on Twitter, and you can follow my other show if you're into music and the band Kiss. You can follow myself and the Carusos, Nick and Nico, at RBTE Podcast, and we talk about all things Kiss. So on the behalf of Terence and Ryan, who aren't here, and our new co-host, Jay, I'm Rob, and you've been listening to the BatmanUniverse.net, and more importantly, you've been listening to Robin. Everyone loves Drake. It's good to be back, and we will see you guys in a couple